I'm here today with Deacon Richard Conlin and a seminarian Raphael Salvino from the Archdiocese of Vancouver. Both of these fabulous gentlemen have just completed our Intentional Accompaniment Masterclass. And I thought it would be an interesting conversation to chat with two future priests about how their experience with the masterclass has affected the ministry that they're in so far, but also how they can see it applying in their ministry going forward and in their priesthood. So I want to throw it to you, Raphael. Tell us a little bit about your experience with the masterclass and what you're seeing is applicable in your life right now, in your seminarian life, and also as you think about your future priesthood.
Thanks, Amber. It's always a pleasure to work and to chat together. When Deacon Richard and I were first in seminary, this was the very first thing that struck me about the masterclass, the title. And I was recalling when Deacon Richard and I were in seminary together, right about halfway through seminary, the Vatican released a huge document. It only happens once every couple decades, basically. It's a Ratio Fundamentalis, which charters and sets the tone for seminary formation for the decades to come. And one of those came out right when we were in seminary formation. And the key word in that document was accompaniment. So when I heard about this accompaniment masterclass, there's that immediate, I guess, satisfaction of knowing that this course I'm taking or this program I'm taking is totally in line with not only the mind of the church, but even the heart of the Pope. So as a seminarian, we were on the receiving end of these really exciting changes. For example, like we started meeting more with our formators. That's like the priests that are guiding us, not only teaching us, but guiding us and spiritually directing us. We started meeting with them more. And I would say that it even changed the environment of the seminary, where there was more of an understanding of walking alongside one another. So we were on the receiving end of this kind of brand new tone to seminary studies. And I really think it made the seminary a greater place. And now going forward, I've got the experience of my time in CCO being intentionally accompanied. Hope that's grammatically correct. I didn't know what to call it at the time. I just thought of it as like having big sisters and big brothers, and then going to seminary and having the same thing. And now I can bring that into my future ministry, knowing exactly what it looks like to walk with someone as they're walking towards Christ, regardless of where in the journey they're at. So it's, yeah, I don't know, Deacon Richard, if you got anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, Ref, thanks for setting it up. So we received intentional accompaniment at the seminary from the monks. And so in the context of the class, like we were evangelized by the monks, Raphael and I, for 6 years. And although we never had an official class called evangelization, having the CCO masterclass now helped us to reflect upon what we received at Westminster Abbey, and then to apply that same model now in the parish. So it provides a very interesting context for this transition out of seminary now into these different parishes in the Archdiocese, in which we can use what we receive from the monks and then share that wisdom for others. So another thing that really comes to mind for me is that we started small groups in the seminary. And so once a week we would meet as a group of 3 or 4 guys, and we'd be able to share kind of what was going on in our life. And it was just a real experience of intentional accompaniment together as seminarians too. And so then the desire to keep that going forward. That's immediately what comes to mind for me. So the title of the masterclass was so fitting, the intentional accompaniment, because the church is promoting that at the seminary, and then now the church is putting that forward for the new evangelization.
That's really wonderful to hear the connections that you were able to see from your own experience and formation. Deacon Richard, you made mention that now you're able to start also applying it in the parish setting. And I know both of you are currently stationed in parishes, and I'd love to hear a little bit about how you have been able to, or how you can see yourself being able to apply some of the concepts, the principles that you learned in the masterclass in your parish ministry. So why don't we start with you, Deacon Richard?
Yeah, so when I came here, I realized there's no young adult ministry. So I started just personally inviting guys to come together as a group. And then once I established that personal connection with the guys, then I tried to figure out what program we could do together. Once I knew the people that I was with, then I started to apply the program. So that was kind of one framework that CCO helped me to understand. It's all about the person and not the program. So the programs are just tools that were given to help accompany the person. And what actually happened was, after about 3 or 4 weeks with one of the programs, I realized, trying my best to do this prophetic listening, that I think I needed to change the program. And immediately we had this incredible experience in which one of the guys in my group loves astronomy. He just bought a new telescope, and he was showing us these pictures that he took of the night sky the previous night. And I had never even watched this episode of the program, and immediately it opens up with these unbelievable images of a nebula. And he had just showed us a picture of a nebula that he had taken. And it was a nice affirmation from God for me that in that moment I was doing intentional accompaniment, in which I was able to meet the person where they were at. And for him, it was such an experience of God that the program he was now taking met him where he was at in one of his favorite hobbies of looking into the night sky. So
that's a really beautiful testimony of the Holy Spirit at work, leading and guiding your discernment and that conversation. How about for you, Raphael? How have you been able to apply, or how do you think you might be able to apply some of the concepts of prophetic listening and intentional accompaniment in your ministry?
For sure. I find at this time, it's the Lord really reminding me and preparing me for this ministry. It very much feels like he's laying a foundation. One thing is just that sense that intentional accompaniment offers me not only the skill, but even the permission to walk with people at different stages. I've been on the one end where I just wanted to implement this program and like get it done, and then, produce the effect without regard for the other person. And then I've also been on the other side where it's, let's say we'll go grab a coffee or something. And then next thing you know, it's been 3 months of grabbing coffees. We haven't really moved forward. So I find that it's the Lord just saying, like, in this time, like, I want you to focus on where you can be, like how you can meet different people. I know this word gets thrown around a lot, but how you can meet people where they're at. And then it really just, for me, all comes down to prophetic listening, like through the building of a friendship, through the establishment of trust. I begin to hear what the Holy Spirit wants me to give through, or wants to give through me for this person. And so even if you have all these people in one group, in one program in the parish, you could say, you really start to hear the nuances of the where the person's at themselves, and you can apply it. And I saw that even just right now. I'm fresh from coming off of a CWL gathering, Catholic Women's League. They just had their first like in-person gathering since the lockdown, and it was just a time for lunch and get together and share a little bit about where people are at. Like, what's one positive thing that happened during this COVID pandemic? And it's just amazing to hear like how varied the people are in their walk with Christ. And so prophetic listening kind of gives me the skill to make a mental note and be like, I think the Holy Spirit wants that for this person or that for this person. So it's still, foundations being laid right now. So
yeah, those are good points, Raph, and how CCO Masterclass gave us the fundamentals and the language to understand the basics of evangelization. And then it's just the uniqueness of each situation, because you're with the different groups of the parish, the different people. It's so varied, but you got to know the fundamentals upon which you can build that. And as well, you're sharing in how really that's what the Lord does to us. Like Jesus is intentionally accompanying us all the time. And so you receive that from the Lord on a daily basis. And then you're just modeling that to others as well. So the prophetic listening and all of the things that we learned is what we've received first from the Lord. And then we can bring that to other people as well in the parish.
Wonderful. Both of you kind of touched on this whole idea of people over programs, or really like the idea of being able to meet people where they're at. And one thing that struck me as we were chatting is that both of you are going to be in a position where you're going to be preaching regularly. So how did what you learned through the masterclass affect the way that maybe you'll think about or approach preaching to meet people where they're at and to be intentional in directing from the pulpit?
Yeah, this is great. Like, it's reminding me that I need to include in my homily prep prophetic listening. Like, that should be an essential part of my homily prep, in which I'm asking, okay, what do these people need to hear? And that should be a key part of my conversation with the Lord, preparing for homilies. So that's at least one start, is that consistently asking the Lord, putting that question out to him, what do these people need to hear? I got a great story actually about this. So there was this priest one time, he was giving a homily. Midway through this homily, he's like, this homily's going nowhere. I need to change the subject. So he says, now for the second part of my homily, I'm going to talk about something else. So he's trying to salvage this homily. Homily did not, to his idea, did not turn out well. A couple of weeks later, this guy comes to the priest and says, a couple of weeks ago, you gave this homily, it changed my life. And he's trying to recall back, and he thinks, oh yeah, I remember that homily. Like, I totally bombed that homily. He said, what stood out to you so much? Like, what did I say? He said, well, that time you said for the second part of my homily, because I realized I'm in the second half of my life and I better get my act together. It's just a great example of how the Lord had a message for that man, and he used this priest as an instrument in some way. So there's some, just the funniness of how God can use us as instruments. But really getting back to that idea of prophetic listening, I'm going to be more intentional about that as I prepare for homilies.
Nice. So I am not yet preaching, but I have to echo exactly what Deacon Richard said. If I had to rename the CCO Masterclass, I would almost call it the Prophetic Listening Masterclass. I would take notes during our sessions, and there's one session where I put 3 words down for the entire session. Just said listen, listen, listen. This masterclass has me absolutely convinced of the value of listening, not only as a natural human way of establishing trust with whoever I'm listening to, but listening to the heart of Christ himself. One ear to heaven, one ear down here on earth. And so I've heard of priests where they've just got such a natural sense of prophetic listening that their homilies are so tailored to the needs of their parishioners. Like, they've really been listening to the heart of Christ, of what Christ wants for that parish. They're able to adapt a homily that speaks directly to the needs of the people. And I hope to do that. So, yeah, because right now I'm at the preparing for homilies. So, but still just floating around in there. So, yeah.
But even, yeah, it brings up a great point. Like, we can live out these fundamentals right now. So even if you're at a parish and you have all these ideas about things that you want to do, you can still live out these principles right now, and it'll bear abundant fruit, because that's how the Lord works. with where we're at right now. He's intentionally accompanying us in your situation, and that's where the Lord wants to bear fruit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I find that encouraging, that it's like, it's a process that's ongoing, but it's incredibly tailored to even just the three of us in this discussion now. Like, we are all intentionally accompanying, and we are all being accompanied. And and it's going to look incredibly different. It's on God's timeline, which is unique to each of us. And yeah, I find that a source of hope, and almost like the release of a stress of trying to produce results. I know there's a little booklet that came with this masterclass, and we talked about it in one of the first classes, the hourglass, that hourglass logo, or sorry, a diagram. And it just struck me. It's like at that point where someone makes a decision to live for Christ, before they grow into the multiplying missionary, like that point where their life is changed is a point where you're not going to see a lot. Like, you've been pouring resources into this person. They've made the decision for Christ, but before they grow, there's going to be a period, who knows how long or how quick, where it looks like nothing's going on. Like the seed is in the ground, so to speak. And that does shake up like our very common parish model, but even just models in general of like, we've got this program, it's over in this long, like we're taking people from here to there in 6 weeks and 8 weeks, whatever. But yeah, like God's not working like that always. He's yeah. So again, the freedom from not being the one who has to see the results.
And like Jesus, in some ways, like he didn't see the results.
Right.
And so like what he did was he intentionally accompanied 12 guys, and then even more intentional with 3 of them. And he was willing to invest time with them. Like in the Gospel of Mark, I love that part where he called the disciples to be with him, spend time with him. And he invested so much time in a select group of people. And so we're modeling Jesus' approach. So it's always comforting to know that, CCO is really just putting language to what Jesus did. And so when people are in the parish, it's like, okay, who are the 3? Who are the Peter, James, and John of my parish that the Lord's calling me to accompany right now? And that is modeling Jesus' approach.
Absolutely. And I think it's good for us to be reminded as well that Jesus did that for 3 years. 3 years in his public ministry, he had those 12 men around him. And so often, we run these programs in our parish for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and we expect to see the same results that it took Jesus 12 years to get, or 3 years to get, So if it took Jesus 3 years, like, we can definitely assume that it's going to take us a lot longer. And we just need to be mindful of the long game, of really being willing to invest in the accompaniment of people. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to have this discussion. I know we could keep going, I'm sure, for days on end, talking about all this good stuff, but for the sake of our viewers, let's keep it brief, and we'll wrap up there. So thank you again for your time and for your participation in the masterclass. Our church is really blessed to have the bright future young priests that we have with us today. So thank you for your presence and for your willingness to be a part of this conversation in our masterclass. God bless.
Thanks, Amber.
Thanks, Amber. God bless.
Yeah.